Wings spread, flying higher above the water, silently. Sharp eyes scan the shoreline, eagles living wild and free, naturally in the Eagle Reserve.
Good evening and welcome to Mount Grace Land Conservation Trust's first ever virtual annual meeting. Thanks to everyone who joined us tonight. My name is Max Feldman and I'm the president of the Mount Grace Board of Directors. This year has been difficult for everyone, but despite all that, Mount Grace has had a successful, if challenging, year. The conservation team has been closing projects, adjusting timelines if necessary, but getting the work done, even notarizing documents through a bathroom window if need be. Our development team has adjusted, finding new ways of communicating with our members, bringing events online. We had over 700 participants attend a citizen science webinar series with expert naturalists on a variety of topics, from mushrooms to dragonflies. Our stewardship team and volunteers, led by stewardship manager Kim Lin Wen, has been keeping the trails open for much needed connection with nature that has suddenly become even more important in everyone's lives. We were able to keep the trails open with safety measures and social distancing, and not only have we retained our staffing levels, but we've added a staff member. In addition to all that, in 2020, Mount Grace had a transition in leadership. Our beloved director, Leigh Youngblood, of 26 years, decided it was time for her to step back. And Emma Ellsworth, who was our deputy director for about a year, has assumed the role of executive director as of October 1st. Leigh built Mount Grace into what it is today, with a spirit of innovation and collaboration. And I look forward to seeing what Emma does to bring Mount Grace into the future and continue the tradition of collaboration and innovation. We'll hear more from Leigh and Emma a bit later in the program. I'd like to thank Marielena Lima, Dave Kotker, Liz Wilson, James Holcomb, and Mimi Helen Jones for preparing the mailing and coordinating this online event. On the screen right now is tonight's program. Our staff has grown since March, and even though we can't be together in person, we wanted you to be able to put faces to names. So here's a slide of our wonderful, talented, and dedicated staff. In the same vein, our board members each made a brief introduction video so you can get to know them and some of the beloved properties Mount Grace has helped protect. And we will introduce those a few at a time over the course of this event.
My name is Max Feldman. I live in Petersham with my family. I currently serve as president of Mount Grace. Since its inception, Mount Grace has protected more than 30,000 acres. This property is one of my favorites. It's called Cutthroat Brook Tree Farm. Some people call it the place with the gnomes, but my family and I just call it Grammy's house. It's open to the public, miles and miles of trails, biking, walking, hiking. Bring your kids, bring your Grammy.
I'm Mimi Helen Jones from Petersham, and I'm the Vice President of Mount Grace. I'm on the Stewardship Committee. Today, I'm at Gifford Memorial Forest on Tully Road in Orange. How's this for a peaceful view? Cardinal flower, water flowing. This rests your mind. Take a walk on Mount Grace property. We're protecting this, you and all of us. Thank you.
I'm Joanne McGee from Northfield. I serve on the Land Committee for the Board of Directors of Mount Grace. I'm standing near one of the cellar holes that belonged to Calvin Swan, an 18th century carpenter and a free black man who lived here in Northfield. Mount Grace helped the town of Northfield preserve this land, and it also preserves the trailhead for the New England National Scenic Trail.
Hi everyone, my name is Leigh Johnson. I am completing my 9 years on the board at Mount Grace, where I currently serve as treasurer. My wife Marjorie and I live in Carlisle, Massachusetts. But right now, I'm standing on a footbridge over Rum Brook at the Arthur Iverson Conservation Area in Warwick. This is where I first learned about Mount Grace after visiting here about 10 years ago now. We learned about all the tremendous work that Mount Grace has done over the years in land conservation in the North Quabbin region, and with the promise for much more great work in the years ahead. Hope you all have a chance to get outside.
Next up is our treasurer, Leigh Johnson, presenting the finance report for fiscal year 2020.
Hello everyone, I am Leigh Johnson, treasurer of Mount Grace, and I am pleased to report financial highlights of the past fiscal year, which ended on May 31st. We are showing a summary report here on video, and this will also be included in the full annual report that you will be later receiving by mail. We had a good year financially, but not without some challenges. Our operating expenses for the year were about $742,000. That is down substantially from recent years, and that's because of the spin-off of TerraCore, which is now an independent organization. Our operating revenue was about $787,000, and thus our operating expenses for the year were fully covered by revenue. An important part of our funding came in this year through federal COVID-19 relief efforts. Mount Grace, along with many other nonprofits, applied for and received a loan under the Payroll Protection Program. We received $93,000 as a loan, and we expect that loan will be forgiven shortly. So we ended the year in good financial shape with about $1.1 million in cash and investments. A significant fraction of this is in restricted endowment, and that provides very important ongoing income for our operations. Finally, our largest source of income is gifts and contributions. Thanks to all of you who have made financial contributions over the past year. Your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks for delivering the finance report, Lenny. On that note, Lenny is finishing his 9th year on the Mount Grace Board of Directors. He's reached the end of his term limit. Lenny's been among Mount Grace's most dedicated board members. It's been an honor working with him, and we'll miss him, and I'm happy to say Lenny will be staying on in the Finance Committee to help us out in the future. Also leaving the board are Larry Fitzmaurice, Lise McLaughlin, and Joel Shaughnessy, who have also been very generous with their time and expertise. Thank you all for your time and dedication that you put in at the Mount Grace Board of Directors. Next up is our election of board members. This year, the annual meeting is proceeding using a proxy format. I'm going to explain it briefly for everyone to understand how it works. The official language around proxy voting is this. Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 180, allows members of a nonprofit to vote by proxy with any member voting by proxy considered present at the meeting for the purposes of quorum requirements. Here at Skyfields Arboretum with me tonight are Joanne McGee, our clerk, Bill McGee, member, Maria Elena Lima, Communications and Engagement Coordinator, and James Holcomb, Membership and Administration Coordinator. Under Mount Grace bylaws, a quorum is 35 members. We had 89 members who submitted their vote by proxy, and there are 2 members in the room with me here. Those who submitted their votes by mail authorized Joanne or myself to vote as your proxy. Accordingly, Clerk Joanne McGee reports that a quorum of 91 members are present, which more than meets the quorum requirement. I want to thank everyone for participating by video here tonight and by signing and returning your proxy ballots. On your screen now is a slate of the Board of Directors to be re-elected for a 3-year term, and our new candidates nominated for their first 3-year term. The following are nominated as new members of the Board of Directors: Bob Busby, Jeff Cole, Elda James, and Magda Ponce Castro. And the following are nominated as renewing members of the Board of Directors for their 3rd terms: Mimi Helen Jones and Steve Rawson. To complete the action required of the members of our annual meeting, I'm going to call for a motion from one of our members here in the room, with the votes of those in the room and those who voted by proxy all counted. Clerk Joanne McGee will then read the results of the vote. Is there a motion to approve the slate of board members, Joanne?
I move to approve the election of the slate of board members for 3-year terms as provided in the bylaws.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Thank you, Bill. I call for a vote on the motion.
The vote on the motion to approve the slate of board members is 91 members voting in favor, 0 members voting against, and no abstentions.
Thank you very much. The motion is adopted, and board members are elected as proposed. Welcome Bob, Jeff, Elda, and Magda to the Mount Grace Board of Directors. And now we will watch a brief introduction video of our new board members.
Hi, my name is Magda Ponce Castro and I live in Northfield, Mass. And here is my backyard and my gardens. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico, and the reason I wanted to be involved and be a board member of the Mount Grace Land Trust is because years back there was going to be a gas pipeline going right behind my house by the Brush Mountain Conservation, and Mount Grace was great about helping and stopping, and I wanted to be part of an organization that cares so much about people and the environment. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jeff Cole from Orange, Massachusetts. I'm joining the Board of Directors here with Mount Grace Land Conservation Trust after being a member since about 1984, 85. I guess I'm like number 44 in the membership ranks out of 4,000. Hopefully we can work together to preserve some more land here in the North Quabbin area.
My name is Bob Busby. I'm a new board member with Mount Grace. I live in Orange, Massachusetts at the Tully Meadow Farm. I support Mount Grace for their work on open land conservation, both for family farms, working forests, as well as for wildlife conservation. I think they do great work. I'm happy to help.
My name is Elda James. I live in Athol, Massachusetts. I joined the board of Mount Grace Land Trust because I began to appreciate the importance of conserving land. And I was impressed by the work that Mount Grace is doing. I'm from Haiti originally. Haiti has the worst deforestation problem. Haiti is losing most of its forest and many of its native species of animals. And I thought learning here I could extend what I know to folks in Haiti who are hoping and helping to conserve land and save a beautiful little island.
Glad to have you all on board. Now, on to the awards. Every year we give out 2 awards. One for Conservator of the Region and the Community Steward of the Region. This year, Conservation Director Sarah Wells and her daughter Reese will be presenting these awards.
The Conservator of the Region Award is given to someone who has protected their own land and who has undertaken extraordinary efforts to protect land across the region. This year we are thrilled to name Joanne and Danny Burden as the Conservators of the Region.
Collaboration is one of the most powerful tools for conservation. We are deeply thankful to Joanne and Danny for collaborating with us to conserve a very special landscape in Templeton. A couple of years ago, the Fernald Corporation decided to sell their iconic 465-acre property on Norcross Hill. Joanne and Danny had long wanted to see this land protected, and the Fernald Corporation, working with LandVest, hoped to sell their property to the Department of Fish and Game.
To fund the purchase, the Department of Fish and Game reached out to Mount Grace and North County Land Trust in hopes of building a multi-landowner project to attract competitive state funding. In order to apply, we needed 500 acres.
A board member at North County Land Trust put us in touch with Joanne and Danny. Joanne is an avid conservationist and Danny is a lifelong resident of Templeton. Thankfully, they were willing to help us brainstorm ways to reach 500 acres. They introduced us to their friend and neighbor who hoped to participate but ultimately chose not to.
When the availability of our grant was on the line, Joanne and Danny saved the project by offering to protect their own backyard with North County Land Trust in Mount Grace.
Joanne and Danny's commitment to the vision of protecting Norcross Hill enabled Mount Grace, North County Land Trust, the Department of Fish and Game, the Department of Conservation and Recreation, and the town of Templeton to come together and save 506 acres with grant funding from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Because of Joanne and Danny, today we can celebrate Mount Grace's very first project in the town of Templeton.
Thank you, Joanne and Danny.
Hello, this is Dan and Joanne Burden.
Hi.
We are very honored to accept the Conservators of the Region Award presented to us by Mount Grace Land Trust. The Norcross Hill Wildlife Management Area project was a collective effort by many entities, and it was a privilege to have been a contributor to this project. Thank you to all that helped the project come to fruition.
The Community Steward Award is given to someone who promotes conservation and stewardship in the community, proactively connects people to nature, and effectively nurtures the next generation of conservationists.
This year we are so happy to recognize Paul Catanzaro as a community steward.
Paul is an associate professor and state extension forester with UMass Amherst, where his work focuses on helping landowners decide the future of their land through conservation-based estate planning.
For 12 years, Paul has partnered with Mount Grace on developing and delivering this programming for landowners. Because of Paul's effort and his commitment to collaborate outreach, thousands and thousands of private landowners have received relevant information about their options, and many have chosen to take the next step in their conservation pathway.
He runs masswoods.org, a go-to resource for woodland owners. He co-directs the Family Forest Research Center. He runs the Keystone Project, training forest owners and community leaders to become incredibly effective local ambassadors for conservation and forest stewardship. He's the driving force behind publications including Protecting Your Legacy, Using a Will, Chapter 61, Forest Carbon, Forest Resiliency, and Protecting Their Legacy. Simply put, Paul is irreplaceable in the world of forest landowner outreach.
Plus, he's a great human.
Humble, funny, kind, genuine, welcoming, optimistic. He's a great friend in this work.
When talking about community conservation and outreach, it's common to hear the refrain that we need to meet people where they are. Paul does this graciously and authentically, whether he's teaching forestry at Ellsworth Hall at UMass,
running a Keystone program at Harvard Forest,
hosting a virtual land protection course on Zoom,
mentoring grad students,
facilitating a question and answer session with a dozen landowners in a town hall basement.
Paul shows up 100% and meets people where they are. He takes every question with care and respect. He's a true teacher and communicator.
Mount Grace is a better organization because of Paul.
Every day, Paul chips away at a goal Mount Grace shares, keeping our forests as forests.
Paul, thank you for being a fantastic community steward.
Hey friends, I am humbled by the honor of receiving the Mount Grace Community Steward Award, an award that was made all the sweeter by Sarah and Reese's fantastic video. All of my work is collaborative, and I've benefited greatly from these collaborations and friendships. Among some of the most notable are my work with Mount Grace is Sarah Wells and Jay Raskew, and of course, our friend Dave Kittredge. These collaborations and others have given me a tremendous education, professional gratification, and inspiration. I am particularly proud that this is a Community Steward Award. After all, it's not government programs or policies and laws that are at the heart of conservation. True conservation is about community. It's about relationships. Relationships of people with one another and relationships of people to the land. All of you at Mount Grace, staff, volunteers, members, you all get that. And that's why I enjoy working with you. I am a firm believer that once you find good people to work with, keep finding ways to work with them. And that describes my collaborations with Mount Grace. I look forward to continuing to find ways to collaborate in the future. Thank you again for recognizing my work. It does my heart good to know that it has helped advance true conservation. And thank you all for the impactful and groundbreaking conservation work of Mount Grace. Stay safe, stay well.
In addition to those two awards, I would like to acknowledge our Volunteer of the Year, Ray Jackson. Ray has been a dedicated member and volunteer with us for several years. This past year, with his extensive knowledge of all our trails, he joined our newly formed Stewardship Committee. He's gone above and beyond the call of duty, either being belly up in a hole or taking the time to walk our trails to decide the best route to give visitors a better experience on our property. Thank you, Ray. Congratulations to all of tonight's awardees. Let's get to know a few more of our board members now.
Hi, I'm Brian Long from Orange, Massachusetts. I'm on the board of directors of Mount Grace. Just want to say how proud I am to be part of a team of folks doing such amazing work in central Massachusetts. I'm especially proud of the Quabbin Harvest Co-op in downtown Orange, a place that I shop quite regularly, which supports our local farmers, showcasing their wares. It's wonderful being here and being part of such a great group of people. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Philip Stevens. I live in Barrie, and I am owner and operator of Carter and Stevens Farm in Barrie. We farm over 1,000 acres. We sell beer, we have a brewery, ice cream, vegetables, grass-fed beef, and one of my passions is to fly over the land and look at the crops and do aerial photography and whatnot. But I've been on the board of directors for 6 months now, so I'm kind of new at it. But the whole land conservation, that's what my life has been, building the farm from 300 acres up to 1,000. And I like to think that I bring some reality of the real farming community to the board of directors, and I hope to help out with that in the future. Nice to see you guys at the annual meeting. Thank you.
Hi everybody, my name is Al Rose. I'm from Red Apple Farm in Phillipston, Mass, and I'm very proud to be on the board of directors for Mount Grace. I think it's a wonderful institution that is professionally run and managed, and it does so much good for our area. And I believe in its mission, and I'm very happy to do whatever we can to promote and preserve our beautiful landscape.
As I mentioned earlier, Mount Grace has undergone a transition in leadership this year. We now have a very special interview between our former executive director, Leigh Youngblood, and our new executive director, Emma Ellsworth, followed by a compilation video of all the conserved land projects Mount Grace completed in 2020.
Thank you everyone for tuning in to the unique 2020 Mount Grace annual meeting. It's been an exciting year of adaptation and transition, and of course, lots of conservation and stewardship. I'm here with the new executive director, Emma Ellsworth, and together we're going to talk about what's been happening and what we can look forward to.
So Leigh, after 26 years at the helm of Mount Grace, what's one of your proudest accomplishments?
Well, sitting here at the base of Tully Mountain, it's easy to think of the Tully Initiative, which is when Mount Grace worked with more than 100 landowners to protect 9,000 acres in 2 years. And that was an example of collaboration that led to many more multi-landowner projects working with multiple partners. And so the Tully Initiative and protecting land in the Tully watershed, it's really what comes to mind. And for you, Emma, you've been at Mount Grace for a year now. What is one of the strongest impressions that you've taken away?
It's funny that you mentioned the collaboration, the Tully Initiative, because I feel like I'm really learning what that word means. We see it everywhere. We see it in organizations' mission statements and on their websites. But I think Mount Grace has really figured out how to embody it. And what I've been learning is that it's all the time that's invested in listening to the partners, listening to what their goals are and what their hopes and dreams are, and then focusing not on the differences, but what's shared amongst the different parties collaborating. And with Mount Grace, it's clearly the love of the land. That seems the key to Mount Grace's successful collaboration.
So we're here celebrating 35,000 acres protected in less than 35 years, but we know that the job of conservation is not done. Emma, what do you see as conservation priorities going forward?
Well, I'm actually pretty concerned that right now we're going to see another wave of a building boom. And I think that a lot of people are realizing that they don't need to live in the city to work, that they can work remotely, and are seeing what this region has to offer in terms of spectacular open space and local food and great community and affordability. And so I think we're going to have a lot of people moving here. And there's a real question about how we accommodate that without losing what we love about the region. But that being said, we have an advantage, which is over the last decade, the hard work of the map making and identifying the priority conservation areas has been achieved, has been concluded. So we now know where we need to focus, and the challenges can be how do we move conservation fast enough to keep up with the development that's coming. Speak for yourself with such an incredible list of accomplishments in your career. What do you feel like is left undone for Mount Grace? What's the challenge you're leaving with?
Well, right now, I happen to be leaving at a time when social justice is so important and in everybody's attention. And I feel like Mount Grace is ready to meet that moment because of our experience with collaboration. So to me, the opportunity exists for Mount Grace to be part of the solution of recognizing changes that need to happen in how we have, our day-to-day work and life and play in the region happens. And because of our long experience of, as you mentioned before, focusing on what we have in common rather than focusing on differences, I feel like Mount Grace is poised to be part of the solution.
So Leigh, it seems that Mount Grace has always played a larger role than just land conservation. With your pioneering work to stop the pipeline's encroachment on conserved lands, the role in putting together collaborative partnerships around food systems, making sure that we have affordable farms for the next generation of farmers, for making sure that we have accessible trails so that all people have access to beautiful places like this one, and for our partnerships with local native tribes. Mount Grace has always seen that answering the needs of the community is part of land conservation. So facing us in the years to come, we have a really significant threat, not just to our region, but to our globe, in the form of climate change. And I think Mount Grace, we need to do more to talk about the role of land conservation as a significant tool to mitigate climate change. I think we need to do more to educate people about the role that climate can play in thinking about our forest management plans. And we need to do more to incorporate climate change into every aspect of the work that we do. Thank you everyone for joining us at our virtual annual meeting and for joining Leigh and I in my backyard and on the dock where I was married. And I look forward to working with all of you in the future to tackle these big challenges ahead of us.
Danny Hillis and Taylor Millsaw donated conservation restrictions to Mount Grace on their abutting properties in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. Their conservation efforts ensured the permanent protection of the entire shoreline of the 43-acre Robbins Pond and the surrounding woodlands, which are intended to be kept as forever wild. Departing board member Larry Fitzmaurice donated his family's 49 acres to Mount Grace, filling a significant gap in Mount Grace's surrounding Arthur Iverson Conservation Area along Gale Road. Earl Acres represents a critical addition to this flagship property. Dick Perkins donated a conservation restriction on 88 acres of his land to Mount Grace and then donated the land itself to the New England Forestry Foundation. The land is now enrolled in the New England Forestry Foundation's Pooled Timber Income Fund, and the timber will be managed according to their exemplary forestry standards. In 2015, the Mackin family donated this land to Mount Grace. At the time, Kinder Morgan proposed installing a natural gas pipeline across Massachusetts, including through this property. As the landowner, Mount Grace had direct legal standing to challenge this proposal. When Kinder Morgan eventually withdrew its proposal, Mount Grace worked with the town of Irving to complete the vision for this property. This spring, the town of Irving assumed ownership and added this property to its abutting town forest. Last year, our partner Mass Wildlife purchased the 465-acre Fernald Corporation property through a Massachusetts Landscape Partnership Program grant. This year, all the remaining projects funded by this grant were completed, including the Burden Project. The Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation also acquired 2 properties from the town of Templeton to add to abutting state forest land. In total, 506 acres in Templeton were protected through this collaborative project. Joanne and Danny Burden worked with Mount Grace and the North County Land Trust to place a conservation restriction on 17 acres of their property abutting the Otter River State Forest. This conservation restriction is Mount Grace's first in the town of Templeton. Joanne was instrumental in the early outreach phases of creating the Norcross Hill Conservation Project.
Next up is a very special project that we worked on for the better part of our year, our 4th Whole Farm Forever project, Sunset View Farm.
Downey. I'm the Youth Education Coordinator for Mount Grace this year. I'm here on the North Central Pathway in Winchendon.
We're on the half-mile hiking trail that connects the North Central Pathway to Sunset View Farm. Here is a glacial erratic. Glacial erratics are stones and rocks that were transported by a glacier and left behind after the glacier melted. Let's explore this beautiful farm.
She's Livy.
And he's Chuck.
And we're the proud owners of Sunset View Farm, Route 140 in Winchendon, Massachusetts.
We bought our farm in 1979 and we've been growing lots of things here since.
Sunset View Farm is a 70-acre parcel of land consisting of agricultural fields and woodlands. Chuck and Livy farm on a total of 5 acres of fields, growing organic produce such as tomatoes, squash, lettuce, and more.
After a few years, and especially after we retired from teaching, we started building other things, like we doubled the size of the stand, we did herbs and flowers, we added up to 500 tomato plants, and just kept growing and growing. We cleared some more fields until we're where we are today, where we service all the surrounding towns, and everybody comes and tells us we can't stop because they need our vegetables.
Mount Grace partnered with the North County Land Trust to co-hold the conservation restriction on the land. In March of 2020, Sunset View Farm officially became the 4th whole farm forever, protected by Mount Grace with the help of an option to purchase at agricultural value. This tool ensures the land and its buildings are sold to farmers at an agricultural value. The goal is to keep the land affordable and in the hands of farmers forever.
Hi everyone, hope you're enjoying the annual meeting. My name is Kate Sutcliffe and I'm one of the Regional Collaboration Coordinators working on the North Quabbin Regional Landscape Partnership.
Oh hey, I'm Jason and I'm the Land Stewardship Coordinator at Mount Grace.
Hi, my name is Aaron Nelson, and I'm the Regional Collaboration Coordinator for Farmland Conservation this year at Mount Grace Land Trust.
What an inspirational project that is. And now, our last set of board introduction videos.
I'm Al Ciano, and I live in Greenfield, Mass. Was educated there and graduated at UMass. And I've been a proud member of the board of directors at Mount Grace for about 5 years. It's been a very good experience for me, and it exemplifies all that I believe in about land conservation and protection. And I think it's such a worthwhile organization that it's so necessary in this environment to maintain as much natural space as we can and leave something nice and clean for the future generations and my grandchildren. That's been a big reason why I'm proud to be on the board.
Good morning. I'm David Spackman. I live in Royalston. I've been a member of Mount Grace for precisely 1 year now. It has certainly been a challenging year for all of us. Pandemic, climate change, resource preservation and management, immigration, food sustainability. They are all global challenges, and often we feel like we can't have any real impact on them. But what I have found encouraging and comforting during this time is that here in our region, Mount Grace does provide a vehicle for all of us to have an impact. And for that, I am very grateful. I'm also grateful for your past and continued support, without which we could not continue to do the important things we do. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Steve Rawson. I've been a member of the Mount Grace board for 6 years and a member of Mount Grace for many years before that. Today I'm at the Fern Glen Conservation Area, a property owned by Mount Grace in Winchendon, 120 acres. And it's about a half a mile through the woods from our property, our 18 acres that we have. How I became familiar with Mount Grace was about 18 years ago. My wife was the chair of the Conservation Commission, and the town was trying to conserve 460 acres that abuts our property and Fern Glen. I watched Mount Grace work with the townspeople, my wife, on the Conservation Commission and DCR to come up with $1.2 million to purchase and conserve the 460 acres. I immediately realized what a great job Mount Grace did, and we became members. Mount Grace also has multiple conservation areas with handicap accessible trails, one in Royalston and one in Northfield. So please come and visit. We would like to have you as a member. Thank you.
I hope that all of you saw Mount Grace's Juneteenth statement on racial justice. We continue our journey towards achieving diversity and inclusion in our community. Mount Grace believes that everyone should have a right to access nature, feel welcome and safe at our properties. We commit to speaking up and speaking out against racism and working to change the systems that perpetuate it. The land trust movement is predominantly white. Communities of color have traditionally been excluded from accessing nature, owning land, and participating in conversations that disproportionately impact and hurt their communities. Mount Grace is committed to engaging with communities of color across our region to explore what barriers exist to accessing Mount Grace's expertise and resources, and to take action to address those barriers. This is a work in progress. We will continue to work on it as long as we need to. We're now very excited to welcome Greg Watson via Zoom to give this year's annual meeting keynote speech entitled Thoughts on a Post-Pandemic Climate-Changed Food System for Massachusetts. Greg Watson is Director of Policy and Systems Design at the Schumacher Center for a New Economics. He served as Massachusetts Commissioner of Agriculture from 1990 to 1993, and again from 2012 to 2014. A former executive director of the New Alchemy Institute, Watson has spent nearly 40 years learning to apply systems thinking as inspired by Buckminster Fuller to achieve a just and sustainable world. Greg?
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here and to be given the honor to deliver the keynote at this annual meeting of the Mount Grace Conservation Trust. I'd like to begin just by congratulating Leigh on her remarkable tenure at the helm of this really outstanding organization, and commitment to social justice and equality and equity is commendable. And really, Leigh is one of the pioneers, especially in the conservation community, to step forward and to acknowledge the importance of embracing communities of color as part of the conservation community. So I thank her very much for that, as do all of my colleagues. I have chosen as my keynote address the thoughts. It's really more of a conversation than I think that is than a keynote, and a conversation about post-pandemic and climate change food system. These are two existential threats that face us. One is a tsunami. It's a very here and now, and that's the coronavirus, and it's impacted just about everyone in every corner of the globe. And the other is climate change or climate crisis. It's not quite the tsunami. As a matter of fact, one could almost ironically call it glacial compared to in terms of its movement, in terms of its impact, compared to the coronavirus. But they both have an impact on our food system, but they're also very different in terms of what they do in terms of impacting our ability to produce food and our ability to distribute and retail food. So I kind of want to talk about those these two threats and really start to put into our heads the idea that the coronavirus is probably a wake-up call, maybe to get us to the point where we need to start thinking seriously and planning seriously about the impacts of climate change. And I'm going to sort of focus particularly the impacts it could have on conservation and land and food production. I have to get into food production because as former commissioner of agriculture, it's part of my blood. There's no question that the pandemic has revealed both glitches and some real flaws in the life support systems of the country and certainly of our region. I think if we can take the lessons learned from those, we can start to redesign our food systems in ways that are anticipatory and that are resilient. And we're going to have to do that. We're not quite sure. The tsunami, as I said, is here and now. It's not quite clear that it's going to go away anytime soon. And so we're going to have to deal with that for perhaps certainly another year, but we are also having to deal with the issue of climate change. And I'm going to try to see if I can't advance here, but it doesn't seem to be wanting to. There we go. When we talk about systems breakdown, we really need to focus on who the most impacted people are and the most impacted residents. And I think it's no surprise, and it's certainly been very well talked about, that low-income communities have been the most dramatically impacted by the coronavirus, and we can only anticipate the same will be true of climate change. This is across the board in terms of low-income communities that suffer, I would say, two types of what I would call sort of preconditions. One is the health implications of not having access, I should say, to fresh, nutritious, locally grown food, and that has an impact on our ability to fight disease and other maladies. The other precondition is economic distress, and that has sort of gone across the board too in terms of low-income communities, and the two combined are pretty devastating for communities that are marginal and have been marginalized and are trying to figure out how they can become more integrated into the larger society. I want to talk the health implications of malnutrition. I think are fairly well known. Perhaps what's not as well known is sort of what I call sort of the economic distress and the economic preconditions. Most people do know that people of color, BIPOC communities actually suffer a great deal from economic inequality. Sort of interesting, and that the average, not interesting, wrong word. The median wealth, net wealth of an African American in Boston is $8. That's the median net wealth. The median net wealth of white resident in Boston is around $247,000. That's a huge wealth gap that it's almost impossible to envision how it could ever be closed. And as a matter of fact, it continues to widen. What it means in many cases is there's no room to wiggle. Any type of emergency or unexpected event that happens usually puts these families in precarious positions with regard to their economic security. And that also means their food security. It also means their ability to maintain a home. So it's very serious situation that has been made and been exacerbated by the pandemic for sure. I just want to point out that it's not all bad news. I think that one of the things with regard to food that happened during the pandemic is that people did come together. You talked about collaboration and the emphasis that the trust places on collaboration and on community. We saw communities really come together, and in the midst of the pandemic. This is, I don't know where I got this image, but it sort of epitomizes one of my the slogan of one of my favorite farms. Seeds of Solidarity, Deb Habib and Ricky, their logo or their slogan is grow food everywhere. And I think we saw a lot of that begin to happen during the pandemic, where people took it upon themselves to try to create their own food security to the degree that they could. But it's an uphill battle, obviously, because we can only do so much with regard to that. Massachusetts right now is, we've got about 7,000 farms, as you probably know, about 500,000 acres of land. A lot of that farmland the prime farmland has been protected by the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources under its Agricultural Preservation Restriction Program. I think investments up to about $100 million, thousands of acres of land, and that's a form of security. But even with that amount of land, we still are eating more than we can grow. We saw the demand for local food grow during the pandemic. Farmers were able to respond to a great degree, but we're still very far away from being able to, and honestly, we'll probably never get to the point where we're going to be more than 30 or 40% self-sufficient in our food supply. But farmers did respond. We found that the farm community, particularly the farmers markets being one example, responded to the issues and problems that were generated by the coronavirus. They were innovative. They were creative. They took it upon themselves to actually introduce their own protocols on how to maintain safety while still shopping at farmers markets. And I think that was very important. It was an indication that how committed the growers were to being able to continue to provide food to consumers in Massachusetts. It also meant that they were able to maintain their businesses, and the viability of their farm businesses, but they really took it upon themselves and self-organized. I think we saw a lot of that happen within the farm community. Moving into the future, I think that we do need to see a bit more coordination, particularly around scheduling of farmers markets. Some of the markets now are sort of at cross purposes with their scheduling and have not maximizing or optimizing our ability to serve consumers with the market system. But those are things that can be addressed, and I'm suggesting we are going to have to start looking at those, particularly as we hopefully emerge from the pandemic, but then are going to have to really contend with climate change and the climate crisis. I'm going to get to that in just a little bit. Other creative and innovative approaches to trying to deal and close the gap created by the pandemic, as we saw. We already have Boston, and I think many towns, cities and towns have their own gleaning operations, but we saw some more self-organized gleaning happen, and working with farmers who were in the process of plowing under their produce, but produce was salvaged by citizens who came together and gleaned and made that available to residents in need, most in low-income communities. That was done, I think, throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And I think that that is, once again, a sign and an indication of the flexibility and the nimbleness that exists when we have local food systems. Our large industrialized agribusiness system certainly does not have that same type of flexibility. Having said that, we still need to understand, realize, and acknowledge that we're still dependent upon that system for the bulk of our food. So while our attention into building more resilient and robust local food systems in response to these crises are important, we've also got to pay attention to the national scale in terms of reforming the agribusiness, the industrialized agricultural system as well. So they're not, they are not totally disassociated. We need to figure out how we're going to deal with both as we move forward. The system, food system, and that's the way we need to look at what we're trying to do in agriculture and meeting our food needs, is to take a comprehensive systems approach to this and understand that it involves everything from growing to processing to distribution to retailing and all the pieces in between. And the more that we can enhance communication between the various components and elements of our food system, the greater chance, greater opportunity we're going to have to create some real synergy and to create, again, sort of a whole that's greater than the sum of its parts. This happens to be a shared community kitchen in Boston, Commonwealth Kitchen. There's been a lot of emphasis on trying to enhance and the value added component sector of our agricultural community to extend and expand when locally grown produce can be made available. And those are good signs as well. We mentioned before that Massachusetts, I think, has somewhere around 1/20th of an acre per person in terms of its agricultural land. We do eat more than we can grow. We need to expand, and if we are beginning to expand our purview and our thinking and our ideas and notions about what our agriculture and our food system really consists of. And when we think about it in terms of New England, we begin to realize that there's a great deal more potential for us to meet food needs when we look at the New England, or in some cases, the Northeast region. Food Solutions New England has been in operation for some years now. They've created a vision and come up with a number of scenarios that demonstrate how Massachusetts, New England states could take on a greater proportion of meeting their food needs by altering, in some cases, our dietary habits. Less meat, perhaps, what gives us the ability to grow more vegetables, more fruits and vegetables. But what the idea behind the initiative, Food Solutions New England, is to help people understand what their options are and what the implications of exercising those options are. It's an important project. Some people see it as sort of an academic exercise, but it's the sort of thing we are going to be compelled to do as we move forward, particularly now as we start marching towards the onslaught or the dormant or sleeping tsunami that is climate change. And when it awakens, it's not clear how fast if the impacts are going to come down upon us, and even what those impacts are. So the challenge is really going to be, how do we deal with the uncertainty of climate change as we are living it? And that, I think, requires some interesting and comprehensive planning that does, in fact, take into account the various alternatives that we need to at least consider. Some of those are going to be how we enhance and the role of enhance urban agriculture and really determine how serious we are about integrating urban agriculture into our food system. Urban agriculture is important for a number of reasons. One, it does give people of color an opportunity to, not necessarily depicted in this slide, but an opportunity to farm. 98% of the agricultural land in the United States belongs to whites. And so there are not many opportunities for people of color to actually own farmland. Urban agriculture is certainly one of those opportunities, although this type of urban agriculture is very capital intensive. And we're finding that, again, low income residents are, even though the projects in many cases are located in their communities, they are not able to take advantage of what are sort of the more lucrative opportunities or revenue generating opportunities because of their capital intensiveness. The other important part, though, of urban agriculture is that we are learning how to grow food in controlled climates, even better than we have before. And as sad as it is to say, we probably are going to have to become more proficient in understanding how we do take advantage of controlled environments because of the uncertainty of the way that climate change is going to unfold. Want to raise a little scare perhaps and talk about climate change and its impact on our ability to our food system's viability. This is just a couple of graphics depicting sea level rise impacts in greater Boston. One's a 3-meter rise, shows a 5-meter rise. I put these here because even though, again, this is not certainly not right, these shots don't show an impact on rural communities, but there are now some serious discussions about migrations and forced migrations from coastal cities to inland rural communities that could result from sea level rise. And these are, once again, serious considerations. These are real possibilities, and the time frame, we're probably talking the same type of time frame that we're talking about the New England or the Food Solutions New England's trying to come up with a strategy for meeting 60% of our food needs by 2050. I think these illustrations here demonstrate or depicting climate change probably somewhere around the year 2050. And along with that will obviously be the need of people to relocate themselves away from the coast. I'm bringing this up for the same reason that, for the purpose of stressing the need for us to start planning for those types of forced migrations. We had voluntary migrations with the coronavirus when people from cities in Boston or like Boston and New York decided that they wanted to leave the crowded cities during the pandemic and made their way to Cape Cod or the Berkshires or Vermont or Maine. But that was a choice. That may not be the case and probably will not be the case as we have to contend with climate change. One of the sea level rise, and some people have proposed to start planning now for what types of circular economy-based new settlements could be proposed in some of our inland rural areas. And for some people, that's a very scary thought, maybe even scarier than climate change itself, but it is something that we're going to have to consider. The alternative is we do not plan for it. We don't think it's going to happen, or we ignore it. And then we're faced with a situation like the pandemic where it becomes a crisis, an emergency for which we have no plan, and that would even be worse. I want to finish by talking about our need also to cultivate, support, and encourage our new farmers, young farmers. One of the other statistics about Massachusetts in terms of its agriculture is that we are an aging agricultural community. I happen to think the average age is somewhere between 56 and 60, which I consider to be absolutely young, but not if you're considering farming, obviously. So I want to thank the trust for its investment in time and energy and resource into developing TerraCore, and I didn't realize that it had just spun off and has become independent. Some of my favorite memories of when I was commissioner was making presentations during the TerraCore orientations. And so once again, just a kudos to the work that the trust has done in terms of not only conserving land, but also trying to do what it can to nurture future farmers that we're going to need desperately. And I hope those future farmers And I think they will also include people of color, which is happening as a result of the developments in urban agriculture throughout the Commonwealth. So thank you very much. I hope this has not been depressing. I hope it has provided some food for thought. And I welcome, if possible, if there's time, any questions that people may have. Thank you.
All right, Greg, we do have a couple of questions for you. So the first question is, how does conservation in rural communities like our region help all of Massachusetts be resilient with climate change?
How can we, the question was, how can we be resilient? I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yes, how can communities like our region help all of Massachusetts be resilient with climate change?
Oh,
sure.
Good question. I think when the trust, I think, in understanding the role that ecosystem services play in creating the resilience that's going to be needed to address climate change by practice. I think doing what you are doing, what you have done over the years, and preserving the overall ecological integrity of the ecosystems that you live in. And I think that's primarily what we all have to do. I think if we can sort of expand that and think in terms of our bioregions, and once again, I don't particularly like the term ecosystem services, but that is it's an important way to think about it in some cases. But I think for you to do and continue to do what you're doing, both in terms of being practitioners and in being teachers, and are probably the most important contributions you can make.
Excellent. Thank you. We have another question. How do you see land trusts from rural areas helping out with urban food systems?
How do I see it? I'm not sure that I am the best person to address that. My experience has been with urban land trusts, and if some of you are familiar with the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative, you know that it became a model for how a distressed community was able to not only gain control of its land, but to develop a vibrant urban village that had urban agriculture as its centerpiece, and also to stave off speculation and displacement. There had always been sort of this assumption that you could not, that gentrification and displacement were inextricably linked, and that the low-income communities that invested and that were able to bring themselves up in terms of their economic development did that at their peril, because it usually led to the taxes, obviously, land prices, land value going up, and people being displaced. I think the flexibility and the creativity that the land trust afforded gave this community the opportunity to actually do a great deal in terms of meeting its own food needs. And I suspect that if rural land trust, I'm not sure if there's any opportunity for there to be land made available to prospective farmers, whether they are trained in urban areas or not, but young farmers in general. My concern is that we're not seeing the farmers being able to pass their farm businesses on to their children the way that used to be sort of the norm, because many of their children have decided they're going to go off and do other things after seeing how hard their parents had to work on the farm. But we do have a great number of farmers, young prospective farmers, who would love the opportunity to farm. And so I don't know if this is appropriate for the trust, but I think there needs to be some matchmaking with between available farmland in particular. Trust, I'm sure there is land in trust that is agricultural land that might be able to provide opportunities for young prospective farmers to actually farm.
Great. Thank you, Greg. I want to acknowledge that we are a little over time here, but I have just one last two-part question.
Mm-hmm.
What would you think the three most important things that our government could do to address some of the issues we've been talking about tonight? And then what would you think that individuals could do?
Probably there may be overlap. The most important thing that the three things that a government can do, one is to listen to and trust science, and that's across the board. Two is to make the commitment to collaborate with other countries on climate change and to join in on the climate change accord. It's a global issue. Certainly, we've got to get into that situation where you understand what it means to think globally and act locally. But we certainly need to be working as hard as possible with our colleagues around the world. And then there are the type of investments that I think are crucial. I have a bias in this regard in that I spent a number of years working for the state's Renewable Energy Trust and working on areas and issues like offshore wind. Massachusetts has New England in general, but the Atlantic, mid-Atlantic up to New England has a vast resource of untapped renewable energy. I think we have to figure out how we all play our part in contributing to solutions. And lastly, but then we have to be honest about what it is that we really can accomplish and what some of the implications of adopting these measures are. And by that, I just real quickly mean that we have to be honest that renewable energy does involve extraction, right? That it uses metals and it uses not just rare earths, but uses copper, steel, and among others. So I think we need to be transparent because I think that almost goes hand in hand with there being, again, regaining the respect of science. Science is as good as we are able to take it and to become transparent with how we use it. Locally, I think taking on our own responsibility to live with as small a footprint as possible. This is the thinking globally and acting locally. I've said that a few times, but I think by supporting your local agriculture, your local food system, farmers markets, I'm okay with recycling. I think maybe it gets a little overplayed, but we should do all of those things that we can, but certainly conserving energy as well. So taking on personal responsibility in our everyday lives.
Thank you, Greg. And then one final question before we wrap up tonight.
Sure.
You mentioned the food system as a whole. How does a poor rural community where agriculture has declined for generations figure out where to begin to rebuild and restore its local food systems?
Wow. I guess what I would say that's going to depend upon community by community, but I do think that you've got some organizations that are willing to and would love to work with you. And I think in particular, an organization like the Mass Food System Collaborative, which is taken on the task of implementing the food plan that was developed by the Massachusetts Food Policy Council back in 2015. And, under the leadership of Winton Pickoff, I have to say that they really have adopted and articulated a comprehensive, anticipatory systems approach to looking at the Massachusetts food system. I guess you would take a systems approach if you're going to talk about food system, but legitimately taking a systems approach. And I think, for communities that were once agricultural or are no longer, you have to start and begin by initiating a process to answer some very simple questions. And one of them is why there is no longer, what happened to the agricultural sector there. And and then to sort of do a little bit of planning and thinking about where and how, what resources there are and how those resources could be applied toward meeting food needs, especially within their region, but throughout the Commonwealth. And if and I would say, given what I talked about earlier, the emphasis on a regional approach, how they could play a role in the New England food system. So I think it's planning, it's visioning, and it's also involving as many of the members of the community as you possibly can, and tap their wisdom, especially those that are at least have some, maybe a foot back in the days when agriculture was viable there, to start to learn about what was there, and then start to explore what options you have based on available resources right now. But it is a planning process, but I think there are folks who would be more than willing to work with you and help you think that through, those communities that are interested in that. You're very welcome. I'm just so sorry I couldn't see folks out there. Next time, we'll get through this.
Thanks very much, Greg. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I just wanted to answer a little bit of that question about what Mount Grace is doing and what other land trusts can do in terms of getting young farmers onto farmland. One of our initiatives, the Whole Farm Forever program, is designed exactly to do that, to make farmland affordable for young farmers of color, and to continue that into the future. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I know it was unusual. Hopefully next year we will all be together in person, and we can give Leigh Youngblood the celebration she deserves. Thank you very much.